So hi everyone, welcome to the third class of our CERIAS seminar series. So today we are very happy to have Miss Chris Kubeka, who is a globally recognized cybersecurity expert with lot of expertise to give a talk to us about a very important topic that we often overlook, which is ethics in cybersecurity. So Miss Kubeka is a CEO and founder of Hypersec NL, which is a which is also like she's also senior cybersecurity advisor for a lot of different organizations. So I don't want to go through her CV because it's huge. So if you guys, so one thing I would say, if you guys want to contact with her, please feel free to send her emails and contact information after the class. So Chris, please go ahead.
Excellent, excellent. And thank you for that introduction. Because one of the things I want to do is I don't want this to be all about myself. I want this all to be about everyone that's watching. My name is Chris Kubeczka, and I have been in cybersecurity, privacy, artificial intelligence, post-quantum computing, a bunch of different things. And I've held a lot of different titles. I was, let's see, an aviator in the Air Force and Space Command, even the former fancy title, Distinguished Chair of the Middle East Institute Cybersecurity and Emerging Technology program. And many of these titles and roles have allowed me to see very different sides of cybersecurity. I've written 14 technical books, and I love the tech world, but also I recognize that the policy world and legislation is also very important because commonly many of our laws and legislation and funding are unfortunately written by folks who don't necessarily understand cybersecurity, privacy, or the actual ethics that should be involved with the technology that we utilize every day in our lives. And the goal of this talk is to use some real world examples, including ones that are actually active as we speak. I have my phone on silent because of it. And to show everyone that cybersecurity and privacy and ethics are extremely important and becoming more and more important as we move forward with a variety of different emerging tech, including quantum computing and some of the risks and some of the wonderful things that can come with that. And I really want to show you all that cybersecurity can actually be quite exciting in many ways, and how we can use some of our skills, some of our perspective, and the diversity that cybersecurity and privacy and ethics bring us to try to make some positive changes in the world. Now, when we discuss ethics, I'm actually speaking to you from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and we have a bit of a different view over here in the European Union when it comes to technology, ethics, and cybersecurity. A good example is years ago, the European Union instituted something called the EU GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. And it was quite earth-shattering to a lot of big tech companies because it demanded that our data had to be taken care of in very specific ways. It has also created a ripple effect where there are now several states, including in California and New York and so forth, that have gone ahead and instituted some of these privacy policies. Although I will say they don't have the same level of bite or fining capability that the European Union does at this time. It's also enabled regions and trading blocks such as the GCC, which is the wealthier countries, we'll say, in the Middle East to also begin instituting their own. So, for example, in the country of Saudi Arabia, data cannot leave the country of Saudi Arabia. So years ago, I spoke with a car manufacturer who wanted to sell their automobiles in Saudi Arabia. I think this was about 2 years ago. And they were a little bit upset over the fact that they could not transmit the data from the cars all the way over to the United States where their headquarters are. Fun fact, your car is a total spy and snitch on you if you happen to own a car. Luckily, I only own a bicycle. But some of these things can have real world examples. So if a tech company such as a dating app, there was a case of Grindr in Egypt that had weak cybersecurity and privacy policies, which allowed parts of the Egyptian government to pinpoint LGBTQ plus individuals for arrest and detention. And obviously, I don't know about you, but I really don't want my technology to lead to my arrest or detention for some arbitrary reason when I travel or in my own home. And it's one of these things that we have to kind of think about. Another thing that we have to think about is big tech companies and advertisers and so forth happen to know more about you than any super secret squirrel spy spooky agency out there because they pick up on our microphones, on our smartphones, and things of that nature. And we have to look at the ethics of just because you can do it doesn't mean you should, and what those real life consequences can be. Now, I'm going to move into a case study that occurred, a series of case studies that started to occur in 2022. Now, to give some background, I arrived February 20th, 2022 in Kyiv, Ukraine. I was brought in case there was a nuclear cyber incident, either at an operational facility or a decommissioned facility. Part of my background is handling nuclear cyber events. And boy, you really don't want one of those, let me tell you. And they were very concerned because there were troop buildups in Belarus and on the Russian side. And when Russia started rolling in tanks, one of the reasons that they came into the east on the 22nd of February, 2022, was there was a water facility in Luhansk that became inoperable. And the Russian government, through propaganda, misinformation, etc., blamed the Ukrainian government, saying, oh no, look what they did. They took out the water supply with a cyber attack. We have to defend ethnic Russians in the region. And that was only one, not the only one, but only one of the reasons that they chose to use to roll in tanks in the eastern part of Ukraine on the 22nd. And on the 24th, they started hitting Kyiv. Now, I myself was wrapped up in this situation and had to get out. And to get myself and the many people that were with me out, we had to use some very creative methods to avoid getting bombed. And one thing I want to stress is everyone listening, and especially the students, be sure to network as much as possible because you never know if someone is working for a government or has access to certain things that can actually help you out of a war zone. So, for example, a friend of mine, he goes by the name of Dutch Ocent, ended up setting up a team and tracking us with live information, and we narrowly missed getting shelled by the Russians, which was unfortunate for the village that happened to get hit, but we were very lucky to make it out alive. And there were many concerns because at the time, some academics did not believe that cyber warfare in and of itself could occur at the time. I happen to disagree, and I got to see it firsthand. Now imagine you're trying to flee a war zone and your internet is getting squeezed, so you can barely get a signal. The Russian government also tried to take out President Zelensky's satellite phone system and ended up affecting all sorts of renewable energy, such as wind turbines, even maritime traffic around the Black Sea, which satellite communications can be one of the communications methods that large ships use as a fallback method. So it even affected part of the French space agency. And all of this stuff was going on at the same time. And there were, shelling and paratroopers, and we ran into PMC Wagner. And through all of this, uh, it was because there were team looking at us and trying to get us out that when I was able to finally cross the border after the border guard was hit with a wiper virus, which is now being referred to as the first instance of a digital violation of the Geneva Convention ever. I happened to report from the border on the wiper virus that hit with the Ukrainian state border guard. And when I was able to cross and get some sleep, the first thing I got was a phone call at about 2 a.m., just over the border, from a friend saying that there was an American citizen, a rather famous basketball player by the name of Maurice Creek, that was stuck in a place called Mykolaiv, Ukraine. I was also warned by other individuals in closed source intelligence, which is the stuff that isn't public, that he was one of the individuals that some Russian troops had chatter about because they potentially wanted to use him as a pawn or ransom. And if you've heard the stories of another basketball player that was detained and then traded for an infamous war criminal, a Russian war criminal, to be able to get her back to the United States, obviously that's not an ideal situation that you want anyone to be in. As I was helping get him out using a variety of different open source and closed source information, um, people started contacting me about urgent situations around Ukraine. And some of these situations were quite dire. There were a lot of vulnerable people, a lot of people with handicaps who had been left behind, who were stranded. There were roads that were being landmined, bridges that were being blown up. So all sorts of alternate routes had to occur. GPS, for example, was being manipulated, and the Ukrainian government had gotten the public to remove street signs. So if you didn't know where you were going, you had to find these routes. Well, in between this, there were a lot of students in Ukraine. And to give you some background, for now probably 2 generations, Ukraine has been used by many people in the global south as a high quality, low cost way to further their education. So if you go to the country of Ghana and you happen to speak Ukrainian or Russian, you could have a conversation with many older professionals because of that, because that's where they did their schooling. So when the war escalated, um, there were about 250,000 students, foreign students in Ukraine. And one of the challenges is if you happen to come from a country that doesn't have a lot of money or doesn't have a lot of diplomatic pull, it's very difficult for your government to assist you in these cases. And I began getting reports and requests for assistance to try to get a lot of students from the global south out of what had then become occupied Ukraine in places like Kherson and Sumy and so forth. Some of these cities that you may have heard about on the news because of the escalation 2 years ago. Now, because of the situation, and unfortunately, there was probably a bit of racism involved, not a lot of people were jumping in to help. And there were situations where some of the students were down to trying to eat dirty snow as the only means of water. So I started to assist using my skills with open source and closed source information to help set up what was referred to as a fusion center to tie the information together. And with that, I was able to utilize many of my contacts, remember, network, especially out of Romania, which is one of the border countries of Ukraine. And they were able to get what I call fearless hero drivers with their own automobiles to go into occupied Ukraine to try to get individuals. There were a lot of very scary situations where sometimes the students had to stay put or had to move very quickly because Ukrainian troops were able to take back part of Kherson, for example. So they had an opportunity to leave. But they had to be tracked to make sure that they didn't run into a landmined road or to make sure that they were going over a bridge that wasn't already blown up or about to be blown up. In between, there was a lot of, we'll say, diplomatic discord to try to ensure that humanitarian corridors could be set up. But in between, there was a high level of surveillance that was going on from Russia. Now imagine you're rolling up a group of individuals whose only goal is to get people home. And you want to do the right thing, but they might not always have the best cybersecurity. This occurred both with smaller aid agencies, community groups, but even the International Red Cross suffered a data breach that was associated with the Russian government. So there was a lot going on, but I was able to utilize my skill set, and others were as well, to ensure the safety of many, many students. So at the end of it, we were able to get out with my particular groups that I worked with, over 7,000 students and Ukrainians from occupied Ukraine. Now, I'm one of those people that I see the human effects. And when I was in Ukraine and the entire region, I happened to see these things happening with my own eyes. And I had been affected myself. And I wanted to see what else I could do to do better with technology. And since then, I have tried to do that. And one of the things I'm currently working on right now is the crisis that is going on in Venezuela. Now, if you haven't heard much about it, there was an election at the end of July, and it is a disputed election. There have been several technologists and data scientists who have absolutely proved that the current president should not be the current president. And this has caused a lot of unrest, but also detentions, disappearances, and murders. Now, the Venezuelan government is unfortunately rather well known to leverage technology to do very, very bad things, and they have a record of doing this. So when we learned about a couple of government-backed apps, one of them called the Ven app, and another one called the Patricia app, that there were concerns that the applications, the smartphone applications, were being leveraged to pinpoint individuals. A couple of years ago when the Ven app came out, there was a Venezuelan who wrote about the app that it could use the GPS location, turn on your microphone, turn on your camera, stop your phone from going asleep, basically turn your phone into a surveillance device. Unfortunately, that individual disappeared shortly after that article was posted. So I'm trying to set the stage of how dangerous it is to even discuss or publish any of this information if you happen to be a Venezuelan. So a lot of people were empowered to force Google and the Apple store to actually remove the Ven app And they also did the same with the Patricia app. The difference is the Ven app was used for newer smartphones and the Patricia app was used for older phones. Now, during all this, I had, I guess, the privilege of having a lot of information shared to me. And because of this, I made arrangements with my, we'll say, secure app provider, Proton, who instituted a whole line of security measures on my particular accounts and so forth to ensure that they were watching me as much as possible in order to handle this information. And one piece of information I received was actually a detainee list of many of the individuals who were being detained, either in known sites and also what can be referred to as black sites, or places where it's well known that unfortunately torture, disappearances, and death occur in Venezuela. Now, during this, I went to the prison administration website and a couple of other Venezuelan government websites to try to pinpoint which one the sites were known in my list and which ones weren't. And whilst I was looking at the data, one thing stuck out to me. Out of such a huge list, only about 14 or 16 people put down their family information as next of kin. Now, think about why you wouldn't want to put your family information down if you've been arrested in Venezuela. Well, the reason being is it put their family at risk. But if your child or your mom or your dad or whomever goes missing, you're going to want to try to find out. So when I visited the prison entity website, and a few others who are run by sanctioned individuals, one thing I noticed that there were scripts running. I generally use a free tool called NoScript. There's a few of them out there where I don't run scripts on my internet browsing. So I went ahead and right-clicked, this is perfectly legal, I want to stress, and looked at the HTML code. And the first thing that stuck out were two things. That on this sanctioned entity website, there was Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics scripts. Now, again, I want to stress advertising companies and big tech companies know way more about you than you probably even know yourself. And the regulations involving them are kind of lax. However, one thing does stick out is they are not supposed to provide services or allow ad revenue to sanctioned entities. Now, for example, the person who had been running the prison for the country of Venezuela was sanctioned in 6 different countries. And as I looked further into the topic, going, why on earth is this script and tag manager running, especially since this might be the only way that family members might be able to find out information about their disappeared family. Especially since the other applications we had gotten taken out of the Google store and were trying to protect individuals so that they could not be pinpointed. So I looked further into it. It turns out that in November 2022, ProPublica had written an article about Google Analytics being used by a sanctioned entity called, and you can't make this up, RU Target, which was owned by a sanctioned entity in Russia. And the tag manager and analytics had definitely collected information and geolocation information on Ukrainians in occupied territory, which was pinpointing individuals for detention, torture, and death. And the only reason why Google decided to halt the use of the script and the tag manager was because that article came out. And attached to that article, there was what I can only say a scathing letter from the Senate Intelligence Committee head, Senator Mark Warner, which basically outlined that Google had to stop doing these things and also to set up mechanisms to ensure that they didn't occur again with sanctioned entity. But here we are in 2024, and I was witnessing the same thing being done. Now, I was able through a variety of different back channels to contact the head of Google's security and notify them that it was not a responsible disclosure. I was not saying, hey, you got a problem with your website. It was actually telling them and informing them that sanctioned entity were using the same methods that they had to shut down with the RU Target situation in 2022. Now, unfortunately, Google's response was not as good as I'd hoped. Initially, they seemed to be looking into the matter. However, I ended up getting legal boilerplate with an executive putting in writing that, oh no, it doesn't really collect geolocation information and so forth. Now, I don't know about you, but code doesn't lie. And I went ahead and did a thorough code analysis, pinpointing all of the privacy issues that were involved with the analytics script, including the geolocation functions down to the street name that was picked up and being collected. So it's pretty obvious to me that this was one of the mechanisms that the Venezuelan government may or may not have been using to further fill some of their prisons and black sites. Now, unfortunately, Google has decided to not shut down any of their Google Tag Manager or analytics script whatsoever on several Venezuelan military websites and several Venezuelan government websites. They have refused. I ended up having to go to a member of the press, and he did a thorough deep dive and posted at a location called Atlas News, which I'm sure can be shared with everyone. And since then, although the article was posted both in English and in Spanish, the Spanish version was supposed to be paywall free. The Spanish version was taken down. And the reason we believe, the journalist and I, and we are not sure, but because the journalist is located in the United States, there is a danger of what is called a slap suit. Now, a slap suit is a very interesting way of censorship, in my opinion. John Oliver did a very good episode on what a slap suit is, SLAPP. Now, I live in the Netherlands, and our laws state very clearly that censorship is illegal. So me trying to get the word out on this very, well, dangerous situation has been difficult because many major media organizations are afraid of a lawsuit or a slap suit by Google or any of the other big tech companies that I have already found absolute proof that they are giving services to sanctioned entities in Venezuela. So one of the things we have to consider in technology are these particular cases and the ethics that are involved with providing services to very dangerous entities who have a history of doing really bad things to people. As when we think about Ukraine, many of us think about all of the refugees and the amount of people who have had to leave and flee and are still fleeing because, for example, Lviv, a hospital was just bombed today. But a higher percentage of the population has been forced to become refugees from Venezuela because of the current administration there. And over 20% of their population. Colombia is housing most of them, but when you see in the news talking about illegal immigration coming to the United States or other countries from Latin America, much of that is driven by Venezuela and some of the corruption that goes on in the region. I should also add with the VENAP, there was a very disturbing thing that I also found, but kind of funny. Happy hacker smile. There are a variety of different political parties in other countries other than Venezuela that support the Venezuelan government and their current regime. And one of the findings I found was the legal representative of the VENAP, when I went to search for her using OSINT and a simple, internet search, it exposed every single one of the Panamanian government resumes or CVs going years back that I could just click into and see all sorts of corruption, including even though the legal representative of VENAP had publicly stated in the past that she did not work for the Panamanian government, I was able to find absolute proof that she did. So it gives you a bit of an idea of some of the goings on in Latin America. Now, to make matters a bit worse, if you're not aware already, I have been doing some reporting, and again, it's hard to get the issue into major media because many major media organizations are like, how does it really affect, the US or in my case, the Netherlands and so forth? And one of the ways is, and this is a bit of history, there was this thing called the Iran-Contra affair. I think it was about 40 years ago or something. And nowadays, Venezuela has been able to produce its own cocaine, and it produces about 33 to 37% of the world's supply. And with that, they have a close relationship with several terrorist groups, and it's publicly known, one of which is Hezbollah, one of which is the Iranian government, one of which is the current much sanctioned Russian government. And I've had run-ins with the Iranian government in the past. They tried to recruit me to teach them how to hack into nuclear facilities. Obviously, I did not take them up on their offer. But one of the things they've been doing is pumping money into technology to restrict women. And when they irked me quite a bit because they doxed me on Iranian TV in my house and so forth, I ended up finding all of their newly installed thousands of IoT cameras that were meant to watch mixed gender entertainment and restaurant facilities to try to get the religious police to see if a woman removed her hijab and was showing her hair. Now, unfortunately, when some sanctions were lifted last year, Hikvision picked up a contract, and this is also public knowledge, but not well reported, that they're developing hijab recognition software. So instead of facial recognition, to detect hair. So the money that comes from the drug trade and the drug cartels in Venezuela, especially, are going to fund these types of things and these types of very negative technology. In addition to that, it has not been very much reported, except seemingly myself or a few Spanish language journalists. Russian troops and PMC Wagner troops are on the ground in Venezuela, as well as now Cuban troops for the last 2 weeks. And it's a kind of a strange thing. I mean, who had, 2024 Russian troops flying surveillance drones over Caracas, Venezuela on their bingo card? Now, whatever information the current administration is collecting on these government websites and these military websites using Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, and other big tech companies, which are providing services, are also most likely being fed straight into PMC Wagner and Russia and the Cuban government. So the ethical implications are quite staggering, especially in light of the fact that none of the tech companies that I have found and started reporting to have halted any of their services to any of the sanctioned entities, which are on the sanctions list, which is also public information. So one of the things I want you all to think about is how we can put a bit of good and ethics into both this situation, but into our current careers and into our current near future careers when we're discussing cybersecurity, privacy, and emerging technology. Now, we've seen that there have been many rapid advances, especially in terms of generative AI. And with that, it can be used for very, very bad things. We have been fighting around the world for things like, oh no, loads of social media disinformation, which have been affecting elections, which have been causing riots and race riots in the United Kingdom most recently. And many of these bots, we think we might be exchanging, commentary with an actual human, but it is not. When you ask it to forget its instructions on a Twitter account and give you a cookie recipe. And the impetus for big tech companies is they are profit driven. They are a business. Everybody wants money, needs money. Money does make the world go round, but they also report their user base as part of their publicly traded or privately traded to get additional investment and ad revenues. One thing they do not do is report what percentage are known human beings versus bots, because if they took down the bots and actively did this, then they would not have the user bases that they currently do. And these are some of the challenges that we have to think about in our field and what can we do about it. And we have to put our critical thinking hat on and start this discussion of, is this a technology we want or need? In my opinion, we should all have uh, flying cars. Our lives should be made easier by different forms of artificial intelligence and emerging technology. However, it seems that our lives are getting a bit more difficult. So we have to consider these things when we think about, all right, if you're going to be handling data that has private information, how should we handle that data? Think about how it can be misused if there is a breach or if there is a new dictatorial government. Now, as I speak to you from Amsterdam, back in World War II, this is a bit of a history lesson, when the Dutch government was taken over, it took about 3 days, unfortunately, during World War II. At the time, every citizen and resident had to register and also include their religion and their relatives' information going back to their grandparents. Well, when the government was taken over, the new government was not so pleasant. And the Netherlands suffered the second highest percentage of Jewish Dutch individuals that were displaced or placed into camps because they had the map to everyone's home and where to pinpoint individuals. And now we have situations where big tech companies and advertisers and apps are doing the same exact thing, but it's the information that you're carrying around in your pocket and they can pinpoint you exactly where you are at any given moment. So in my opinion, it's even more dangerous in this day and age. So one of the things I wanted to do was open up the floor for some questions and answers because I love questions and I would love you all to fire away and ask me, and let's start a discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you for the really insightful discussion. So we have few questions already. So we have one question from Diana. Diana says, "Good afternoon, Chris. I admire your trajectory and your accomplishments. My question to you is, have you ever faced people who dismissed you or tried to put you down because of your intelligence, success, or anything else? And if so, how do you handle that in this field and in life?"
One of the things I try to remember is something I read when I was a teen, the Dalai Lama. Um, and he had expressed that when he was younger, he was quite an angry man because he did not have a regular childhood. And sometimes when he would visit locations, some people would protest against him. And he described a situation where an individual had actually spat on him. And he saw the individual and noticed that he was bald, had no hair, and he thought to himself, I also have no hair, and that used to make me really angry. So he realized that the other individual was just filled with fear. And when people dismiss you, they're usually afraid of you. And I try to keep that in the back of my mind. Also, when individuals try to dismiss me, I ask them to clarify what they said. And most of the time, they don't. So try your best in a diplomatic manner to stand up for yourself. Ask them to clarify that comment in a very calm manner. And remember, the reason why they're doing it is because they're afraid of you.
Yeah, thank you. We have a lot of questions. So second question is from Dylan. Dylan says, "Do you have a favorite OSINT tool, basically, yeah, open source intelligence tool that you use?"
Well, I do like census. I also like CENSYS. I also like Start Page, which is very good because you can anonymously view things. And the way you can search for things, you can actually do old-fashioned kind of Google dorking, but you can't do that with Google anymore. I also like DuckDuckGo. I use excuse me, several very interesting Russian Telegram bots and OSINT bots with that. And I regularly check GitHub for a variety of tools and fork them into my repository so that I can add them into my apparatus. Uh, yeah.
So we have a follow-up question, basically from David. Are these in your books?
Yes, some of them are, but I really have to update some of my books with some of the newest and greatest tools. I just keep getting pulled away with some of these things like Venezuela.
Okay, yeah. The next question is from Andrew, who says, "What is the biggest ethical challenge in cybersecurity for students and practitioners?" I think it's a really good question.
Well, I think it is recognizing how data can be misused. Now, we all want to push forward. We all want to innovate. I was speaking with a startup in the UK who was trying to do cyber education, and they had a really good product. And on their team, they had a lot of behavioral scientists. And when I looked at the product, I also looked at this thing called the EU AI Act, which I highly recommend reading. It's a couple of pages long, maybe 3 pages long. And anytime you are tweaking or modifying something based on input and you involve behavioral scientists, that's actually now in a high category that has to be declared. And they hadn't even thought of that. So we have to think about some of these things and how it's being used, what type of data is being used, if we're actually doing a little bit of human experimentation. And I think that the EU AI Act is actually a very good basis to take a look at because it's in so many things now.
Okay, yeah, we have one more question, but yeah, before going into the question, so I'm from a Bangladesh, very small country, whether you know or not
Oh, I
Bangladesh.
do. I
Yeah,
do.
I think you have heard that recently we had a big revolution sort of thing, lot of fighting, lot of people died. So basically relating to that question, there is a question from Simon who says, what is the best way to mitigate the threats from oppressive governments? So I pulled the Bangladesh because our government itself tried to repress the movement, tries a lot of AI tools, lot of different things. So just to tie them together. So what do you think is the best way to mitigate these threats?
Well, it can be difficult, especially if the government, for example, in Venezuela, and also this has been happening in different parts of occupied Ukraine, if the police or foreign troops have phone devices to check phones at checkpoints. So it takes some creativity. Some of the methods are hide apps. So purposely hiding your real application. So even if you're stopped at a checkpoint, trying to use a VPN that does no logging. And I want to stress this. If it's a free VPN, or even most of the advertised paid VPNs, they will sing like songbirds to try to retain their business there. So try to use a trusted one as much as possible. I also use a lot of alternate browsers and private browsing so that I can't be tracked as easy. So for example, Start Page, when you visit a website, it gives a bunch of your computer information away in something called a user agent string. So what language should the website serve up? What keyboard do you have? What operating system, and so forth? And using certain things that mask that, like Start Page, it will completely mask the entire thing. And you can also visit websites using them as a proxy. So I do that quite a bit. I'm also very careful to use alternate mapping software and downloading maps ahead of time so that I don't have to be connected to the internet. But there are a variety of things that you can do. And maybe I should write an article, follow-up article about this, because it's very important to keep safe. Right now, I've already gotten reports that people are just deleting everything off of their phones, even, the most cherished family photos of, past relatives, because they're so afraid if they get caught with certain apps or anything that could be suspicious at a police checkpoint, that they could be detained or disappeared. And it's a real danger when you are under a dictatorial government. Another thing I recommend, I think it's about 12 years old now, but if you search for The Dictator's Guide to the Internet, a PhD student, I believe, in the Netherlands posted it. And it's basically a playbook of how many of these dictatorial governments actually operate. And you can reverse engineer that and try to step back and try to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, we have more questions, but as you talked about like writing, there are few comments and questions saying like, do you have a newsletter where
I
you talk?
need one.
Yeah, you need one definitely
I
because there
need
are
one.
few
Yes.
people are talking about that. Some other questions, so this is from David who says, who is in the US you respect in the field that's similar to your skill level or higher?
Well, there is a chap I quite like, other than, of course, Gene Spafford, who is wonderful. I got to say that. But also a mutual friend of his called Jeff Mann. So he is a very good individual who is extremely resourceful and has a heart of gold, just like Gene. Um, and there are a few members that I've met so far on the U.S. Defense Science Board that I highly respect as well. In the field, also, Katie Mazuris is phenomenal. And I believe her name is Katie Bowen, if I said that correctly. She works a lot in the field of highlighting how our IoT devices, smartphones, and so forth are leveraged against people who are being stalked or victims of domestic violence, for example. and has worked closely with some phone manufacturers, antivirus companies, and so forth to detect some of these, say, commercial off-the-shelf surveillance apps, where if you search how can I track my wife, you can buy this for like $50 to $100. It's terrible stuff. So trying to detect that on smartphones when people are trying to keep safe.
I have two questions. I will merge them together because I feel they are similar. So it is, how do you deal with the danger of confronting directly these oppressive governments like Iran, which are known to be quite aggressive and hostile? And also, how do you navigate yourself as a woman in places that are oppressive towards us? So this is from Bruna and Diana. So
All
your
right,
answer.
so I do poke a lot of bears, and this is just the uh, author copy. In one of my books, well, I happen to write about hacking the Russian government and putting it in there, and then making fun of Putin on the back. Um, one of my best quotes in the media after the Iranian government basically tried to kill me, um, was revenge is best served over IoT. So every time they have come at me, I have come at them harder and harder and harder, because I think it's more important to stress and talk about these issues, especially with the hijab recognition stuff. That is insane. Where else will that technology be used, right? And I do sometimes, unfortunately, get placed in some dangerous situations right now because of the work I'm doing with Venezuela, well, with Venezuelans. There's a police alert on my name, on my home. I've had to go to safe houses before, and so forth. But I am absolutely determined, and especially now, because this isn't well known, but whilst I was fleeing, I ended up breaking my ankle and tibia. I thought it was just a really bad sprain. It was not. So since I've been able to walk now again for a year now, every step I do it out of spite, knowing that I can freely walk around and do these things and tell people like you and try to empower you.
Yeah, so before going into the like last two questions, so Diana has like commented you are a kick-ass woman, so I just
Oh, thank
wanted
you.
to say that out loud. So
And so
we
are
have,
you.
yeah, we have a question from Noah who says, what company in your opinion does the best in providing most robust security and privacy for their users?
Proton. Um, so I had met the CEO years ago when they were just getting set up at a closed conference on, surveillanceware being used against people in the EU, right? And uh, I then signed up, and anytime I have had a lot of very sensitive stuff, I have, by the way, I pay for my account. They do not pay me for this. Um, they have kept me safe, and especially with the Venezuelan situation, they put all sorts of additional protections. And I also hold journalist credentials, and I tried to apply. Google does do a lot of things. I've even worked with Google in the past, so this is not to really, slag off Google or anything. But when I tried to apply for additional journalistic protections, they kept denying me. Proton was like, we're rolling this stuff up. We'll set this stuff up. You're under all sorts of additional monitoring, everything. And I was like, brilliant. They even rolled out a bunch of VPNs for Venezuela and so forth, and set up all sorts of stuff. So I have really, really been impressed with them. And again, they don't pay me. I pay them. So, yes.
Okay, then we go to the last question. So are you working on any new projects, books, or papers when they are scheduled to come out?
Yes, I recently came out in late April. It's a rather long title. Secrets from the Future, and it's hacking in a post-quantum world and effects on cybersecurity, national defense. Probably messed up the title because it's so long. Um, and it's up on ResearchGate. Even though it says it's not peer reviewed, I didn't put it in a journal. I wanted it to be open, and it was actually peer reviewed by the individuals in the acknowledgments, including Mr. Jeff Mann, and also Mr. Pressman from the White House Office of Quantum Computing as well. And it discusses even how dictatorial governments will most likely misuse some of this technology. So I tried to put in what will happen, most definitely, what is already happening, like things like harvest now, decrypt later, where we've already observed this type of stuff. So it will get even worse with quantum computing and the acceleration of cyber warfare with emerging technology involved with quantum computing or before using generative artificial intelligence. And on the side, I've been working to update some of my technical books and also an interesting project. Back in the day, during World War II, the precursor of the NSA and CIA put out a sabotage book so that if you were in occupied places, they would tell you throw pebbles in the machinery, set up bureaucracy to slow things down. Well, guess what? I'm calling it the modernization of the OSS sabotage manual, which is currently in the works, and draft copies have been circulated both in English and in Spanish.
Yeah, so I don't want to hold you any longer, but few requests for like two
Oh,
more questions.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. So one question is that do you believe that sending letters will one day be more secure than using technology?
Yes, I
And
do.
like side note, like which VPN do you think is better? Something like TwinGate or whatever you feel about VPNs.
Um, the one I generally use because it has no logs is Proton. They also aren't a commercial company. They're now set up as a not-for-profit type of organization, if I classified them correctly. And they only retain data in Switzerland. You can barely get banking information out of Switzerland about dictators. So they're not giving up logs because they don't have any. Um, so that's one of the reasons why I pay to use them.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, folks, for like all your
Yes.
questions. I would say definitely send my email to Chris if you have more questions. I tried to cover all of them, but it seems like overwhelming questions, and people are really happy to hear you.
Hey, and if anybody, especially the students, want to do like a few write-ups or blog posts with me after this to follow up, I am absolutely all for it because I
I
love collaboration.
Thank
I
you.
think you would probably have some students that would take you up on that. I don't know if you were able to see the chat. It is just high five after love after love. Your talk has been very, very well received. And I hate to hijack the very end of it, but I have a question.
Oh, yes.
You work with so many dictatorial governments who actually control information. Where can people get the most accurate? Because I do believe that a lot of articles are skewed not only just by misinformation, but also by bias, right?
Oh, yeah.
So are there areas where you think people can get the most fair and informed reporting?
I don't remember the name of it because I was going to get it and I tested it out for a while. And it is, I think, a paid service, something like
Okay.
15 dollars a year or something. I'll have to try to remember the name. And what they try to do is they measure the bias and perspective that's going to be different and which like they've got a colored sliding scale and so forth to tell you, for example, when the BBC reports on their own government, they're going to be more biased towards supporting their own government, right? And so, you know, you even get this, or if it leans more towards the left or the right or to the center. And so in the articles, it will actually tell you that information. So it's like a bias, anti-bias calculator,
Oh, that's
basically.
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of students have written in here grounded news or ground news.
Oh, yes, that's it. I believe that's it.
Oh,
I think that
fantastic.
might be
Great.
it. Yeah, yeah,
Awesome. I'm going
yeah.
to look that up.
Yeah.
Well, we should stay in touch and
Yes.
maybe come up with some other collaborative
Yeah.
opportunities. Yeah, this super great talk. Thank you very much, Chris.
Well, thank you
Really
for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been so much fun. Woohoo! So can't wait to work and talk with y'all. And please feel free to circulate my email to any of the students as well.
fantastic. We can do that. Great. Thank you
Yay.
so much. And
Yes.
I'm happy to come visit you in the Netherlands too. Let's set that up.
Yes.
Work that out. We'll
Yes.
call it work.
Yes.
Make that happen. So, okay, great.
Absolutely. All right.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you. And thank you again, Dr. Kareem, for your help with the questions and everything too. Awesome. All right, everybody.
Yes,
Mwah,
thanks
to
everyone.
everyone, sending hugs from Amsterdam.
Yay.
All right.
All right. Ciao,
Thanks a
ciao.
lot.
Bye.
Thanks, Chris. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.